because there are, of course, well-known matters of interest and perhaps concern with streaming media. And I think what we wanted to do is foreground some perhaps newer insights based on some recently conducted research from University of North Carolina, Greensboro. And so I'm very pleased to be able to kind of moderate this session involving in-person participants and online Zoomer participants. So to start with, we'll do some introductions for the audience on those that are presenting. Christine, do you want to start us off?
I'm Christine Fischer. I'm the head of technical services at UNC Greensboro.
Elizabeth?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Ellis. I'm a master's student in Library and Information Science program at UNC Greensboro.
And Dina?
Hi, I'm Dina Samora. I'm the program chair of organizational leadership programs at Colorado State University Global Campus.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm Michael Carmichael. I'm the head of visual media at Sage Publishing, and I have a big role in overseeing our streaming video publishing. So we have some wonderful insights to present today based on some research. To start with, just to set the scene, why are we here? Why are we doing this research? I think we've witnessed some key trends in the growth and the use of video in higher education, and we continue to see those. Panopto sponsored some recently published research out of the UK in 2019 involving I think 700 undergraduate students across the UK, and they're reporting again a rise in engagement with video with students in the classroom, the potential for the development of skills and knowledge. Interestingly, for the first year ever in their studies, they saw students stating preferences for video over learning with video over books, which could be quite troubling, potentially. And this is also kind of correlated, I think, with the latest Kaltura report that's come out. They've released one every year on the state of video in higher education. This is their latest one has come out again in the summer. Both of these reports are freely available online, and they also talk about in higher education kind of increase in use of video, preferences amongst faculty and students, the positive kind of reception to it in terms of in-class remote teaching and broadening inclusivity and accessibility. And then last year I was here and we were here describing some of our own research. We've been at Sage looking into the impact on learning, what video does in multimedia content, but video particularly in terms of the effect on student performance and emotional response and engagement in the classroom. And anyone who's interested, please come and speak with me after the session. I'll be happy to talk to you. We have the white paper that we published, not here, but I will take your details and we can send it to you. So why are we here then? I mean, there are these trends for the rise in video, but of course there are some stranger things that lie beneath the surface, and they are going to be talked about by our participants in some detail. But they kind of, in a nutshell, they come from a perspective of there's some inertia still. I think there's some potentially lack of confidence or training with faculty members and the use of video still, which needs to be overcome. Still sort of some understanding or lack of understanding on the rights for use and the different sorts of rights for use. New accessibility mandates coming online, and the need to navigate around and through those and take those very, very seriously, as we all do. And of course, all of this, I think, presents wonderful opportunities for librarians in this kind of new digital information age that we're now in. So that sets the scene nicely for this important study that UNCG has been leading, and I'll hand it over to Christine to introduce that study.
This is a little awkward. I'm sorry about that. Elizabeth and I were involved with developing an assessment project. I'm going to start off by just giving you a little bit of context, and then Elizabeth will give you the results and share some of the themes that were developed, that we could develop after hearing from the participants. I'm a member of our library's assessment team, and several of us wanted to make sure to include a collections assessment project. The biggest area of interest, it has been streaming video lately amongst us in the library. So we chose to study the perceptions of faculty and students and the use of streaming video in the curriculum. The members of our group were Elizabeth and myself, and our then Assistant Dean for Collections, our electronic resources librarian, and then 2 support staff who work directly with faculty on acquiring streaming video, among other obligations in their work. We attended training sessions. Our collection, our assessment team coordinator set up training through our School of Education's Office of Assessment. They came and did workshops with librarians and support staff on focus groups and on setting up a protocol, figuring out your research question and that kind of thing. So we all participated in the training, and then 2 of us also did IRB training and then put the proposal through the IRB and were approved to have these focus group sessions. As far as recruitment, we contacted our faculty who we knew were using streaming video because they had sent a mediated request through 2 of our platforms, which are mediated. Everything else is available just openly to everyone on campus. So we had emails, we had liaisons contact their faculty and say, hey, we'd like you to participate, and if you'd like to share this with your students, we'd like to recruit some students as well. And then we had signage around the reading rooms to try to attract students. So we ended up with 2 sessions for each faculty and students. We had various questions, more than are on this slide, but essentially wanted to know how faculty were incorporating streaming video into the curriculum. How were they finding films? How were they selecting films? What kind of technical issues were they running into? What did they want the library to do to help them in this process? And we ended up with 6 faculty, and you see there the couple were in anthropology. We had someone from English, the languages department, and history. Students were asked just about their general use of video, not specifically library resources, and then we asked them to counter that, what was their experience with library resources, what devices were they using, what was the situation like if they were on campus versus off campus, so that we wanted to have a kind of a broad understanding of their experience. And then we talked to them specifically about how they liked or didn't like the streaming video as it's incorporated into their courses. So although we had 2 focus groups, we had 3 students appear for the one, and then no one came who had signed up, so these are things that just happened. And now Elizabeth is going to talk about the themes and some of the things that we learned.
Thanks.
Hi.
Thanks very much, Christine.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth. I'll bring up. And just for Elizabeth, before you do, so Dina Samora from CSU Global Campus wasn't part of the study, but has kindly agreed to come in and share her perspectives as a sort of a passionate faculty user and consumer of streaming media. So we thought, since it's about faculty, students and librarians' interests, we thought it was really important we could have someone from the faculty side as well. So Elizabeth, yeah, I'll bring up the first couple of points, and over to you.
Okay, so as Christine mentioned, we asked instructors about what types of assignments they are using streaming video for, why they like using streaming video. And so one of the things that we were kind of surprised to hear, and we heard this in both focus groups, was that streaming video can be a solution to a lack of literacy skills perceived in undergraduates. So some faculty expressed that undergraduates today do not read as much as or to the level of students that they have taught in past decades. So they're turning to streaming video to supplement course content. They're combining the streaming video with written text. So faculty are using the streaming video to make sure that students are understanding the main points of a lesson or a specific concept that they are teaching in the course. So faculty that we spoke with claimed that in addition to ensuring students were understanding the material, combining streaming media with written text in a course helped their classes to feel like students were more engaged. They reported having better class discussions. And this was true for both traditional face-to-face courses, but also, and especially, multiple instructors said for online class platforms, especially those that are in the summer, which instructors said tend to feel really rushed. At UNC Greensboro, those summer sessions are 4 weeks long, so they can feel like you're fitting in a lot of content into a very short amount of time, and streaming media is a great way to make sure. Oh, there's a little bit of an echo. Is that happening for y'all as well?
No, we're okay. We're okay. We can hear you just fine, Elizabeth.
Great. Okay, I'll just carry on. One example that an instructor told us about, she was a literature instructor, and she described an online course that she teaches in the summer. It's a general education requirement course, so it's very popular with non-English majors. And she insisted that streaming media was a really essential way that she provided those students, especially non-majors, with historical context or author background that were related to the text she was asking the students to read. So some examples that she gave were author biographies. She would have students watch videos of that, or historical documentaries that related to the time period that the author lived or wrote about. And then also they would read a short story or a novel and then compare it to a film adaptation. Incorporating streaming media in that way, according to that instructor, made sure that the students were able to meet the student learning outcomes in the short amount of time that they had together in that online course.
And thanks, Elizabeth. And Dina, just from your perspective, is that what you're witnessing with your own use of video in the classroom as well, or is there anything to add separately and to what Elizabeth was just saying?
Yes, exactly what Elizabeth was sharing. That's been my experience as well. With oversight of almost 300 faculty and the curriculum, we do much of the same thing. We find that guided discovery works very well in organizational leadership, especially with in the use of the discussion forums. Sometimes we can use it, especially as our budding leaders are learning. They can learn through maybe watching something controversial and recognizing, their own bias and how to possibly remove that bias from their writing, of course. And then, of course, we want them to go to the library and find those credible sources to support what their biases, or maybe what their take is on a particular topic. So, the use of that streaming video, whether it be clips or movie clips or news clips or a full-blown video, then it really does help with that guided discovery.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dina. So let me bring up the next batch of points from the faculty side. The sense that the searching and making sense of these huge databases can be overwhelming. There's the repeat use or stability to films, or lack of can be frustrating. And we can't see that point at the end there, but it's about copyright. Assume that the assumption that librarians have handled all copyright matters with streaming media. Do you want to speak to some of that, Elizabeth?
Sure. So what we found, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the similarities between faculty and students using these, but in terms of the faculty, in talking about how they are accessing material. We found it very interesting, again, to kind of talk about guided discovery platforms, that instructors are actually getting students started on finding these materials and then actually encouraging them to take the lead in their own education and find videos that are going to more individually meet the needs of students' curiosity. So they're asking students to locate additional videos. They are also locating additional videos, but they are using some of those materials that students are finding and they're adding them to their own list of materials that they would potentially want to use for courses in the future. So we asked about how faculty are going about finding streaming media, and we really got a lot of varied responses. So there really was no one way or one access point that instructors were using to search for materials in the streaming video platforms. So some of the ways that they were accessing these materials were searching keywords related to the topics they wanted to show film on in just the general catalog at our website, library.uncg.edu. Others were actually searching for DVDs. So we can limit, in our catalog, you can limit your search to DVDs. They were clicking on this limiter, searching for a DVD, and then they were clicking to view additional formats and they were trying to see if those titles that they knew existed on DVD were also available through streaming platforms. And then some of them are also going through the research guide that we have developed for streaming media. Some faculty said that they actually don't do the searching. They reach out to a library liaison to locate a film for them instead of searching the platforms themselves. Across the board, faculty said that they wanted more training on the best ways to access streaming videos. And they indicated that they would like if streaming platforms were organized or recommended based on what subjects they tended to feature on those platforms. So if there was, for example, a best database or platform for films related to anthropology, they would like to know that when they're accessing it. Faculty expressed frustration when trying to access and use streaming films from semester to semester. So instructors really commented on how challenging it was to create course materials at times that include streaming media, even though they find it such an important instructional tool. But preparing these materials in advance, even though we think that that's ideal as instructors, when it actually came time for the course, it might be a semester later or several months later, they would oftentimes, their students would actually run into issues accessing that and then let them know. And so what had appeared to happen was our subscription or access policies had changed. And so then those films were no longer available for faculty, or they had to find a new way to incorporate them. And that was obviously something that they expressed was really frustrating. One faculty member said that the way that they kept film for future use was by saving a link in an email that a library liaison had sent them semesters ago. So every semester they're actually going back and finding that original email and then playing the film from that link. And then again, faculty also expressed frustration and confusion when students are having difficulties accessing this material, but then they don't necessarily know how to troubleshoot those issues. So that's something that they were struggling with. When we asked faculty members about copyright and public performance rights, there was the general response in both focus groups was that they were really uncertain, they were confused, and that they ultimately assumed that when they accessed the streaming video through the library, that library liaisons had already taken care of any potential issues that they might run into, so they could use the film however they wanted to.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. And so, Dina, as an active user of video, then can you relate to some of this? I mean, there's navigating your way through platforms, finding the content, directing students to the right material through the trusted library source, and this sort of assumption, perhaps that faculty members think all the rights are cleared, everything's fine, we know what Is that something that you can relate to there as well?
Absolutely, I would echo just about everything she mentioned there. In fact, our librarians have listened to us and helped us to actually build a specific database just for streaming video or videos or that type of information, so that faculty, content experts, they're developing courses, and our students can go to one place and find that. So every vendor that we use would be listed there within. We're also working diligently to keep our videos in-house. So we're creating some of our own professionally. We're housing whatever vendors we're working with. We're attempting to stay with them as we move through, and that would be Sage and others like them. We're working to keep that type of information, which is very professionally done, and something that the students can access easily within our library, so that they're not going out and finding sources that will break down, such as YouTube. I hate to pick on YouTube, but YouTube will, sometimes the links go down. We all know that. So we keep them for a vendor that we're using, or in-house, or our own creations. We don't have that type of issue for faculty and students.
I think it's fine to pick on YouTube, Dina. It's absolutely fine. I don't think you can have much pushback. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide then. So from the student side, and then we're going to have another slide which is bringing some of the commonalities together across faculty and students. So there's some of these stranger themes from the student side. The two or three we picked out first. Let me move you to so that others can read those 3 points. So we've got, interestingly, that students prefer to view streaming media via the trusted library source, more than just thinking of the library as another Hulu or Netflix. That might come as a surprise to perhaps people in the audience. How students appreciate guidance to discovery of new types of content. They're looking for choice and diversity. That's really interesting, and they like the directive nature of these platforms and services. And there is that that sense that, again, unless directed by their instructor, they are perhaps struggling to find unless it's assigned by a class instructor. So Elizabeth, there's plenty here as well you can comment on. What do you want to pick up first?
Sure. So while instructors seemed to let us know that it was frustrating when our titles changed in the platforms that we provide access to through the library, students kind of echoed that, but they tended to find that the library streaming video was more consistent in their experience than services like Netflix and Hulu. So we were, I think, a little surprised to hear that students are choosing to tune in and find materials on streaming platforms that we have available through the library catalog, as opposed to these more what we think of as individual subscription, entertainment-based platforms like Netflix and Hulu. Some of the things that students talked about were how constantly, again, film titles change, access to titles change on Netflix and Hulu, but then also the cost, the subscription cost. They change. They also are charging students. One student commented on how they have to pay for this service every month, regardless of how much or how little they use that service. So they like that the library provides them a free place to stream media. And they're also using these platforms not just for entertainment, but also for to discover new information. So documentaries. We had one student talk about how they kind of self-described as a documentary junkie after they were assigned to view something through the streaming video platforms that we have available through the library. They started to explore on their own, and now they are, anytime that they have free time, they're trying to find interesting documentaries on topics that they are interested in outside of class. So that's another thing that we kind of discovered for students. Students appreciate the guidance. They don't know what they don't know. And the students that we spoke with were first introduced to the library streaming media through classes. From that initial introductions, some students were encouraged by instructors to actually go and look for new materials, but then others just decided to independently search for content. Students suggested that the library actually give everyone, because not every instructor is incorporating streaming media, so students suggested that at orientation, the library actually tell all new students about the streaming platforms that we have available, and then make the links for those platforms a little bit more prominent on our library website, a little bit easier to find. Initially they are accessing this content through Canvas or whatever learning management system, but they're also finding links in their course syllabi, but mainly they're clicking on these videos and accessing them through Canvas, which is another important point about how they're getting to the library's resources.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Elizabeth. And Dina, just from, I mean, this is interesting, I imagine from your side, is this interesting kind of research, are these interesting findings in terms of students' curiosities around sort of streaming media content that would be more educationally focused, if you like, for want of a better term, curriculum aligned media. Are these similar trends? Are you seeing similar trends where you are, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
Absolutely, that is the trend. And to echo again what Elizabeth was sharing, is that our students do appreciate having the videos there. Now we intersperse them within our lectures. We have a written lecture, then a video to support that. And the students really seem to like that, that mode of learning. Some of them will go right to the videos, and unfortunately, as we learned earlier, skip the lectures. But they do. We try to provide that very educational type of video, so that the student does, if they do skip the reading portion, that they do get at least what we're trying to teach them in the course. We also are able to use the students can use that as a way to provide their own assignments. We have students do video assignments within our courses, and so they can take that and kind of get an exemplar, as it were, to be able to create their own video, which extends again, the whole idea that this is a trend and a wave of the future, absolutely, for our learning. And the thing I think the students appreciate most is they simply don't have the time, especially in our programs where it's an 8 to 6 week course. They don't have the time to go out and look for the information and teach themselves. So they really are depending on us, much like Elizabeth said, to give them that education. And using that streaming video does really help.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dina. Okay, so then the final couple of points, and really of many points, we've summarised really the 5 key ones here on this slide, are around kind of students' access issues, and perhaps some interesting findings there. Access issues more on than off campus. Perhaps Elizabeth, you could say a bit more about that. And then of course this increasing trend about the use of media on multiple devices.
Okay, I kind of lost you a little bit there, so is it okay if I comment on what we found related to these
Absolutely,
points?
yeah, we've got you.
Okay, so like Dina was talking about, it's really important for students to be able to access this content on their time and when and how it's convenient for them. So students reported that they are using multiple devices for streaming. A lot of them are using laptops, but they're increasingly using their smartphones, their cell phones, to access streaming media. So they spoke to how they have apps for their streaming media, obviously like Netflix and Hulu, but then they also have apps for their learning management systems like Canvas that they are accessing material through for their education. When students told us that they were having issues accessing these films on campus, that could have been due to the fact that the students we were interviewing or that we were having in our focus group live on campus, so they were not necessarily trying to access it off campus as much as like a distance education student might be. But they reported on campus issues that they had were slow buffering, not having the ability to fast forward through films or rewind some streaming titles. And that varied from platform to platform, but those were frustrating connectivity issues that students faced.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And Dina, do you want anything? Do you want to add anything to any of that in terms of your experiences?
I don't, not for that necessarily. No, no, not that I've already said.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll bring it all together a little bit. We'll say 5 minutes before we've got time for some questions. We'll talk a little bit about some of the findings that overlap between faculty and students, those commonalities. And so, Elizabeth, what I might do is just bring up the kind of 4 of those things together at this point, and then I'll leave it to you to sort of pick out, hotspot the key ones or the key issues you'd like to comment on. Okay. So we've got 4 things that you, through your research, really kind of brought out and summarized as the themes.
Okay, so something that we noticed as a commonality between both what the faculty had to say and what the students had to say about their use of streaming media was that streaming media is seen as empowering for students. It gives them autonomy and choice of learning materials. It allows them to feel more engaged, and it also allows them to kind of dig deeper into topics that they're interested in, all while they're still being, they're meeting their student learning outcomes. It's contributing to their academic success in terms of what instructors want them to learn, but then it's also helping them to engage a little bit deeper with materials. Both students and instructors prefer the reliability of access that we provide through our library streaming platforms over services like YouTube and Netflix. The material that they're accessing is more credible, and they're just able to more consistently access it overall. So that's something that both faculty and students preferred. On the other hand, though, there were also some challenges that they faced in locating materials through our library catalog. And then streaming media, if they lose access, it is frustrating. So what we kind of found is that digital literacy skills, so that involves like searching and evaluating the different types of formats that you're going to encounter online. Those digital literacy skills, there's a gap that exists not just for students, but also for faculty members. So at one point we asked instructors, well, when you encourage students to search for films, whether that's on YouTube or through our library catalog, how are you teaching them digital literacy or information literacy skills? And there were kind of crickets in the room. So they're not really getting a lot of guidance from their instructors about what makes, for example, a film credible, or what types of keywords or limiters you can put on a search to most effectively find what you're looking for. Both the faculty and students wanted more training and exposure to streaming media available through the library. Faculty said that they wanted workshops at the beginning of semesters. Students said that they wanted an introduction to it at orientation, and then both wanted more information that's like easily accessible online for them.
Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Dina, can I just ask about what you're seeing in terms of the power of streaming media to empower students, whether you're seeing sort of a growth in personalized learning, kind of that sort of, that approach. Is that a trend you're seeing? Does video contribute to that? Is that what you're witnessing in your own teaching, in your own school?
Absolutely, and it has become prominent, and it's not just in my program, but across the university. And what we've done in our program, because we're finding much of what Elizabeth was talking about, is how do we find the, good information, credible, relevant, and on topic to what we need. It's not always easy. Now, maybe accounting, maybe that program may have a little better chance, to find some information there. I think some programs more than others. In our program, we were having a very hard time finding. Now, there's sources such as TED Talks, that do a lot about, leadership and such. But what we were finding is they weren't necessarily talking about what we wanted. So, you know, in our courses, and we were specific about what we wanted. If we're talking about conflict resolution, how do we find that? You know, how do we find something that definitely talks about the theories and the practices? So what we've done is create our own. We really truly have been working to create a whole library of information that can be used not only in our program, but across the university if they should need that particular topic. And what our provost has done, which I thought was very innovative, is she lives in the Colorado area, and she found many executives that were willing to share on specific topics such as organizational culture or you know, something relevant to what's in our program. And she was able to cross many organizations, government, education, business, and she actually went and did a wonderful professional interview with these individuals and created maybe 30, 45 to an hour worth of information. We were able to take that and chunk it down into bits of maybe, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just what we wanted the student to know in a particular area. And it's become a library of information and live streaming that we can use. So we find that that's a very effective way to go. I don't know if it does take a lot. It's, you know, it's challenging because you want it to be professional. You know, not necessarily like what I have in the background here. You want something that's professional, and you want, you know, the person that's being interviewed or speaking to have a professionalism about them. And it's not always easy to find. So it does take time and money and effort.
You know, I think your guitars makes you look very professional and very authentic. So we have 3 or 4 minutes left, and I just want to thank you both for, you know, it is a whiz through some very important research. I'm sure it might have piqued your interest in the audience, maybe some questions. So if any of you have any questions, I speak. If you shout them out, and I'll repeat them back down the microphone for our presenters. Yes. So the question, I think more for you, Dina, perhaps also for Elizabeth, is how are faculty actually finding their films? They may be looking for sort of individual pieces of content from perhaps individual providers. Perhaps start with you. Can you give us your perspective on that?
That's a very good question. And yes, they are. They like I said, our librarians have created this wonderful area where all of our videos and live streaming are kept. So whether it be something we kept ourselves, created ourselves, or whether it be a vendor. We do go to Sage quite often. They have some very professional videos. We also use LinkedIn Learning, which is one place that seems to be very exciting for students to go. Because there are segments, it's almost a course in itself. I don't know if any of you have used like LinkedIn Learning, but it's you can go out there and learn just about anything, including if you want to learn how to use Sway, you know, or use one of something Excel. They have a very educational driven and training type of videos. And so our faculty are actually going right to the source now. They know where to go. They've learned, some of them, those that are seeking, they'll go right to that area that we've created for them. And I see over and over they're gravitating toward certain, like Sage and LinkedIn Learning seem to be the favorites. There's others, but those seem to be where they gravitate.
Thank you, Dina. I think we might have time for one more question, possibly. Yes, yes, you in the pink top.
I was curious about what types of content, aside from documentaries or films or professors using
It's a great question coming from the audience. What other, aside from kind of documentaries or feature-length films, what other types of content are professors tending to assign and use in the classroom? Question for any of you, either of you.
Well, what I find is they're really gravitating toward those areas that can help with the concept in our program, but I know for my colleagues, they're looking at the same thing. They're looking for, if they're in criminal justice, they're looking for specifics relative to that, areas where students can actually take something and apply it right away, or use it for a theory, or use it for a concept. That's where they're gravitating toward. They're truly looking for. The documentaries are fine. The clips are fine, but when you're trying to drive home a concept or an idea or a theory, that's why they're going to those specific places, those vendors that I had mentioned previously.
Thanks a lot, Dina. We're at time. We just skipped by very quickly. Please come up and ask more questions, and perhaps we can keep our presenters on for a couple of minutes. If no one else comes into the room, we'll see if we have time for that. But I'll just hand over to Christine to close out our session.
Well, thank you, Michael, for moderating and keeping us alive with interesting questions. And thanks, Elizabeth and Dina. But most particularly, we want to thank everyone who came today to share in all of these conversations that have to do with streaming video, because I know it's something we're all trying to incorporate into our library resources. Thank you.